Let's see. All right, here we go. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or maybe it's even good evening for you. Welcome to another episode of Jordan's Famous Friends. Today, I have the pleasure of sitting down with my beloved friend, Knute Larson, somebody who I've long admired a long time. Knute is a pastor, he's a coach, he's a friend, he plays pickup basketball, he hikes the dunes and loves his wife relentlessly. So, Knute Larson, welcome to the podcast.
Spelled with a K. Jordan, it's a pleasure to be with you. I admire what you do as a pastor and as a friend, and let's do it. I ask me anything you want. I can always say I don't know.
When I said you loved your wife's name is Janine, when I said you loved Janine relentlessly, is that accurate, or would you use a different word there?
Faithfully, 62 years, baby. Not always relentless, but that would have been my fault. But yeah, we enjoy each other. It's good.
Out of the 62 years that you guys have been married, how many were happy?
One time, one time at 25, somebody asked me how long we've been married, and I said 25 years, 24 wonderful years. I've never said it again. I had to explain that on the way home, and I'll never say that again. 62 wonderful years.
That's fantastic. Unbelievable. How many more? You guys on like renewable contracts, or how's that work?
We are, we are. We just signed up for 10 more of hiking and love, and I think we're so grateful to God. Serious. That's the key because we're old.
Well, New, I know that you give short answers. I understand that, so I'm going to do my best to kind of pull out as much as I possibly can as we talk today. But if you would just kind of give us how you got to where you're at. You're over in Michigan right now, but yeah, like where you're from, all the way up to where you're at right now. We say it's the Cliff Notes version of that. You can go on and on in regards to specific areas, but where you started, born, and then how you got to where you're at in Michigan.
Yeah, the physical I can say easily. Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I grew up with tragedies. My parents' divorce, my sister's death at 14, a wonderful grandmother. Those things, big part of my life. I'll talk more if you like. Went to college at Grace College, where I met Janine from Ohio. And at the end of college, we got married. Went to seminary at Grace. Had an internship with a wonderful, beloved old pastor, very young actually compared to now, but he was a good pastor at Worcester, Ohio. Agreement for 2 years, and then two long pastorates in Ashland, Ohio, and the chapel in Akron, Ohio. Then we moved. We had already been vacationing here. We've vacationed here in Michigan, Lower Michigan, 62 years since we got married. Didn't live together before we married, but then moved here the day after I retired from the chapel and began coaching and teaching some adjunct teaching. So God's been so good to us. That's a brief physical transition plan.
Yeah, for sure. When just honing in just a little bit, because I know childhood sometimes shapes adulthood, and in that time of Pennsylvania to Grace, you said there are some things that would be beneficial to put underneath a microscope. So can you elaborate on those just a little bit, like of some of that, how you went from here in Pennsylvania to Grace? Those are obviously two different states.
Yeah, when my parents divorced, the church waved goodbye. I hate that. But I say it with no sarcasm. It's just church didn't know how to handle that. When my sister was killed at my father's house on Father's Day, none of that should have been.
Right.
She died in a horse tragedy. Leaped over a rock and she fell off the back. Anyway, the church, my parents had already waved goodbye to the church. The church waved goodbye to them when they divorced. Didn't know how to handle that. Uh, One time at church, I was 14. No, I was 17. My sister was 14 when she died. I started to cry when a guy asked me how I was doing with my sister's death. He changed the subject. He
Hmm.
didn't want to see me cry. The church, it was a good church. It was a good church, fundamentally sound, but emotionally a little, churches sometimes didn't know how to handle pain and didn't know how to speak of tragedy or those things. My grandmother, our grandmother, 4 foot high, 4 foot 1, fourth grade education, Mother Teresa, and she will be on the victor stand together. She did Bible clubs in poverty sections of Harrisburg. She gave away money. They weren't wealthy, but she was so generous, and she cooked our meals while my mother worked very hard as an interior decorator. So I learned a lot about what the church should handle and pain in my personal life, and didn't learn a lot about marriage.
Hmm.
Uh, it was, I look back and God prepared me for good things. I would say at both churches I pastored, the divorce recovery groups, I hope you'll take this right, I'm not bragging, the divorce recovery groups and the grief support groups were our largest outreach in both churches because I was determined we weren't going to run away from people in pain. And so that part was good, but I don't know how to talk about that, about sovereignty. Sovereignty is a mystery to me, and I worship, but I can't explain it.
Hmm. You wonder what those would be like attended today.
That's a good question. I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's so much of that today, and the churches that I coach, and your church, and many churches are doing so much better in those areas. But we were, the word fundamentalist, and it has great connotations about truth, but lousy ones about culture and connections.
Sure. For sure. Um, Moving kind of from that, you talked a lot about like pastorate and education and background. Those like you said are the physical. We have something that's a little deeper than that, which is things that influence us in regards to literature. What books have profoundly had an impact on your life? Majority of pastors that we talk to say the Bible, and we're going to take that one as an obvious.
The Bible.
Right. I have a meme of you when and it says if when you ask the pastor what book they should read and they say the Bible, which you told me that in a conversation a long time ago. But other than the Bible, all right, and I know you're an author, so you can say your own if you want to. But are there any books or authors of books that have significantly influenced you or played a role in shaping your perspective on that internal, guiding you kind of along the path that you're on?
Yeah, for sure. My older brother, just a year older, is a scholar, a Princeton grad, and all A student. And I was a would be athlete and never quite made it. So he was reading heavy stuff in 10th grade, honest, and president of the chess club. I was trying to make the team and make some tackles or baskets. But it's funny, the Normal Christian Life is a book about Romans 6 and the crucified life, Watchman Nee. And I was a Watchman Nee freak for about 3 years, and clearly a little off base, making everybody say it wasn't it was Christ and stuff. But it really influenced me in a good way toward what does it mean to live the combination life, where, yeah, Galatians 2:20, I wrote my senior thesis on that in seminary, and I still love to speak of the combination life where we're dead in the sense of our selfishness, but I still live yet by faith in the Son of God. So the combination life. So books that have been about that, me and the Holy Spirit together, and I usually win but shouldn't. But the combination life, The Fight by John White in Canada, a long time ago. Great book. It's probably out of print, but those were some of the books. I did my best to read theology and passed my tests and did okay in that way. But for personal, I remember crying over the Normal Christian Life and Romans 6, a commentary can't even say by whom, but of what it means that Christ lives in me and what can I do, not not to say I do nothing, but to die to self, to try to obey Christ and live the combination life.
Hmm.
A friend, excursus here, a friend who was in the same clique of Watchman Nee folks. Some of your listeners never heard of him, I know that. But it was Christ in me, the hope of glory, but I'm crucified, he's alive, maybe to an extreme. But she sang a solo at Mansfield, and I said, that was really good. She said, it was not me, it was Jesus Christ. And I said, it wasn't that good. And we both smiled, and I was a smart aleck. But try to get the balance of that. A lot of my personal benefit came from reading books about the combination life, Christ in us.
Hmm. Well, who'd you say the fight was by?
John White.
John White.
A counselor in Canada. As I say, it's probably out of print, but I can give you mine. But it's good. It's such a balanced thing. You know, books are always about self-effort or, Norman Vincent Peale kind of old things, or about Christ, the Holy Spirit, filled with the Spirit. This is about the fight. I fight to obey Christ and to live with Christ in me.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Moving into so books are important. Purchases also are important. They can impact our life positively, but we're always interested in the little things that make a big difference. This I'm going to ask you is a twofold question because I'm interested in your younger years. A purchase or an investment that you made that had a positive impact in your life, and then the second part of that question would be like in your older life, was there a specific purchase that has a positive impact? It could be a product, it could be a service, it could be an experience, that something that made like a difference for you.
Well, first I'll say it was my Mazda because I love my Mazda, and that's recent.
Which one? What was it? A Mazda what?
Just XC5, the small SUV, not the smallest, but anyway. But the funny story about that was I was walking out of an inner city church I'm coaching just 2 weeks ago, and a guy saw me staring at me. It's a little scary. I'm going to exaggerate just a little, but he had been in prison on drugs, and he's staring at me, and I said, "Hey, hi." And he said, "Where'd you get that car? How'd you get a car like that?" I said, "Well, I worked hard. I love this car. A Maserati." He says, "You're driving a Maserati." I said, "No, it's a Mazda." But anyway, that was fun.
The looks can be deceiving.
Yes. Anyway, it starts with M. It's a funny answer, maybe. A purchase was my front tooth.
Really?
When I was, yes, sir. When I was little, the Civil War days, they didn't. My brother and I had a fight. We had many fights, but this one he won, as he always won. He's bigger and stronger, and I broke my front tooth off, so it was chipped. And in those days, I was 13. They wouldn't give you a new tooth or cap your tooth until you were 21, so your teeth stopped growing. I don't even know if that's true. I think they've changed that. But I never smiled. I didn't want anybody to see my chipped tooth. I was president of all my classes in high school and of the student body. I did some speaking. I was up front a lot in college and seminary. I never smiled. I finally got a capped tooth when I was 21, but I never smiled because of my habit.
That's interesting.
Now you say that's not, I'm glad you said that's interesting, but now I coach pastors and I say when they preach, you don't ever smile.
Do you think that's because you notice it though? Do you think that's because like you noticed how often you couldn't smile and so it makes a big difference?
Sure. But people need to see warmth too, whatever way it comes. I don't mean giggle, but that's a serious answer. You may think is funny, but the tooth was in older age. It was a termite cottage. We've been coming to the same spot. This is very carnal, which is near Lake Michigan, about a quarter mile away. We've been renting and renting and renting. It was $50 a week way back when. You weren't even not only not born, but not even uh, uh, history you wouldn't even know. But $50 a week. We came only here on vacation with another couple. We bought this termite cottage, got the bid. It's a wonderful location. We say we live in paradise. So that's very carnal, but very much we give credit to God.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
That's a purchase.
I can just see you smiling in your Mazda. I almost said Maserati.
Maserati.
Yeah.
I'm calling it a Maserati. Yep.
Failure has a big impact on us. Share a time, because often failure can be like a stepping stone to success. Give me a time when you face failure or a setback and how you overcame that and how that set you up for success. So oftentimes failure looks like, man, this is going to tank us, but in reality, it moved you in a different direction.
Well, I've failed in marriage a lot of times in terms of attention, and probably our greatest tensions were I work too hard, and I try to balance that for guys now, though I do try to get the guys I coach to work harder than they do usually. Those failures of little things or weeks at a time really were good, because my wife is very candid, very loving, but very candid. And so those were failures that helped me to work harder at that. Same thing with kids scheduled. So because my parents, I'm shifting for a moment, had failed in their marriage, I tried to meet with our kids. I had appointments with we only had 2 kids, 2 girls, which is what many geniuses have. I know you do. But I tried to have an appointment every week with each of them as they grew up to do whatever they wanted to do for 90 minutes. That's not the only time we talked, but it was one-on-one, and they're different then. Those were the failure of my own parents in marriage, or my dad hardly ever had a 10-minute relationship with me until way after the divorce and after that. But so that's what I think of when you say failed. I didn't fail as a pastor. I certainly did in specifics at times. And right now I'm trying to get a guy to apologize to his church for something. And I said I did a number of times, sometimes not even when I thought it was wrong, but people took it wrong. Personal failures are very important to grow by and to admit, and there were a lot of those, but those would be some of the things.
With failure, obviously, like we said, that sets up for success, and then you start to see some of that success because of those failures. If you have one go-to, and I tell guys a lot, I should probably ask your wife, or if I'm talking to a woman, I should ask your husband. But normally we have a tendency in life to say the same things over and over again. What's your one kind of go-to message to the world? You got all this wisdom, you got all this experience. Oftentimes it comes down the funnel into one go-to philosophy, or I don't like that word philosophy, but it's a message for sure that we impart to others. What would you say your go-to message is?
In some ways, it was, as a pastor, consistently with the same people, and still shows up in. I preach most every Sunday now. It is, why would you run away from this? The message of Christ. The go-to would be, why wouldn't you look at this great big question about eternal life and about justification? I'm sure my hobby horse is still combination life, but even before that, justification, gift of righteousness by faith in Christ. Gift of righteousness, that I stand perfect in front of God, already seated in the heavenlies. if you grow up in legalism and don't go to movies, don't do this, don't do that, and make sure you go forward, raise your hand. You, you need something much deeper and much more personal. And boy, it's biblical. It's Christ in us, yes, the hope of glory, but justification. We are declared righteous by God. He sees us in the lens of Jesus Christ, his son. Whoa, that is grace. So it would be grace.
Our platform obviously is audio, and for those of you that don't know Newt, I can feel your hands moving as you say that.
Oh man, I guess have grown in this. I'm sure I've grown in this, but I probably started emphasizing that a long time ago because of growing up with rules. I think I still have rules. I just kept some of them already today, but rules are nothing compared to the love we have for Christ and the love and grace he gives us. Holy smokes. We're to say we are in Christ, already seated in the heavenlies, declared righteous because we have faith in his son, Jesus Christ. God declares us righteous. Romans 3. That's my go-to message.
Love it. With I don't know where you're at right now, but I know you have a big library. I know you've read a lot of books, written a lot of articles and stuff like that. You have any quotes that you live by or that you think of often? Is there any quotes or mottos that have kind of stuck with you throughout the years?
Well, I don't always keep it, but someone said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Even yesterday, a guy said to me, "The only reason I did that is because you reminded me of the golden rule of Jesus." And I do say that a lot. The only reason I went back for trash on the parking lot at church was I wish other staff would do that. I got to do it too. The only reason I apologize is not the only reason, but yeah, that's a big one. I'm not trying to be pious. I'm sure there's some quotes from others. A long time ago, the greatest of these is love hit me, and if I've been criticized as a pastor a couple times by people who thought my message was too positive. All you do is preach on love. Well, that was an exaggeration, but I did more love than law. That's for sure.
Sure. And some people, like a quote will come up like really fast. Like some people will think of that, but that is a quote. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a biblical verse as well, but at the same time, it is a quote, and if it resonates and it comes up often, then it is impactful. Besides your
another one,
yeah, go ahead.
Let me say another one that's quick. The only way to learn patience is to stand in line, and I think of that every time I'm in line or I'm trying to learn patience with family or neighbors or nagging people at church. The only way to learn patience is to take it, stand there, and then appropriately respond later. But that's true. I like that quote.
So besides your Mazda and your front tooth, investments come in many forms: money, time, energy, things like that. Share with us one of the best or most worthwhile investments that you've made in your life outside of the tooth and Mazda. Maserati that had a really significant impact on your personal and professional growth.
Time with staff. We had a growing church in two places, and always took one-on-one time, and always once a month just went out for breakfast. So as late as yesterday, I had a text from staff down in Carolina. A guy, he's now a senior pastor, but even when we had two on staff, and then when we had 18 pastors, I spent not a lot of time, but one-on-one with anybody that reported to me and anybody that ever wanted. So investments of time, same thing with two girls, and my wife and I always had a date. In spite of a heavy schedule, we made sure we had a date every week. Those investments, and I always invested in board people and never went to a board meeting without meeting with the chairman first or having breakfast and going over the agenda. Investments of time with people in the church and in my family. Those would be, unless you mean financial investments, and I'm no good at that. I had a good friend that helped me that way.
I mean, it depends on who we're talking to. Sometimes we'll talk to people that definitely say, it is a money thing. Like, you should invest in this. But then other people, it's time. It just depends on the person. Um, it's yours. It's what's your most worthwhile investment. And if it lands in time and you clarified that with who that time goes to, um, that's important. So yeah, it definitely had an impact on personal and professional growth. So it's fair. It's a good answer.
Starting 2 weeks ago, when this guy said this thing about my Maserati, I'm looking for Maserati stock to buy. So I might invest that way. Maybe you can go with me.
You got a lot of time left to let an investment grow. So yeah, go
That's
for it.
right.
Move
That's right.
Not to use the pun, but changing gears. Um, what's an unusual habit or something that is absolutely absurd that you love? It could be like a quirk or a guilty pleasure. There's something that's an unusual habit or like would seem absurd that you're kind of fond of that brings you joy.
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I don't have a good answer. I still play basketball, and that's kind of absurd because I'm not any good anymore. But the guys are good to me, and I still make some shots. Can't jump at all. That's absurd that I still do that, but I'm grateful to play with guys that have patience. And sometimes, anyway, the unusual habit. Uh, I don't know. I don't know. I I'm very messy, and I'm sitting in a beautiful office right now that my wife will not enter.
Because it's too messy.
It's too messy, and I clean it myself twice a year, if possible.
All right.
I Yeah, that's absurd. People, one time I had at the chapel, they were so good to me, and I had a beautiful office that they cleaned and kept clean, and I kept very neat. Met people there, but behind it, I had a study. One time, one of my best friends on staff looked at that and he said, "This is a pigsty." And I said, "You're fired." And we laughed. That's an unusual habit that shouldn't be there. If it's sin, I confess.
All right. Then what new belief or behavior or habit has most improved your life? So change is constant, right? Growth comes from kind of adopting. I don't want to say that we this isn't a Darwinian concept by any belief. It just means that we're growing up, we're maturing, things change in regards to beliefs and behaviors and habits. But what's something that you've incorporated into your life that has had a positive impact that has helped you grow?
Well, it was young adult that I discovered for myself the combination life. I like that word combination, Christ in me. I already refer to that. Uh, Another one would be as a pastor, anybody who's a leader, a pastor's a leader, he's a shepherd. Uh, I can't change anybody. I can do my best. I can love as far as possible, but I am not going to walk away. I finally adopted that feeling guilty that I didn't change this guy's belief or his grouchy attitude. I'm going to work hard, but I am not going to take that to bed with me. I think I've done better at that through the years, but I remember thinking, I can't change that man. I wish he would, but if he's going to be mad at me and stay mad, now that I've tried, it's not my fault.
How do you
That's not
not
fair.
how do you not take that? Like, is there a process of you kind of like unloading that in your head? Like, what does that look like to not let that bother you?
Well, first that I've done everything I could. I in coaching pastors, I think, well, you got to go sit down with him. You can't. I think every time that somebody in a board meeting, I detected a grouch that was going deeper than the subject, I would call him and say, "Let's have coffee," and say,
Hmm.
what's wrong? I remember one guy, I said, what's wrong? He said, he had objected to some policy change about use of the building. I knew that wasn't the issue. And what's wrong?
Hmm.
And he said, the music. I can't stand the way the music. So we got to talking about music. Didn't solve that, but uh, at least I've tried to stay with that and do everything I can, but then not take it to bed with me is the way I say it. But
Yeah, for sure.
there's a verse, Jordan, in Second Timothy 4, I think. No, it's chapter 2, but where he says, "Take care of your own life and uh, teach the truth and and reprimand the man or deal with it and have a kind spirit." And then I always add, and then go to bed.
Hmm.
Because if you do all you can, that's all you can do. That's really profound.
Yeah.
But, flee youthful lust. The Lord's servant must not be quarrelsome, kind to everyone, correcting his opponents with gentleness, and that they may escape the snare of the devil. But then I say, and then go to bed. Just meaning you've done your part. Pray, yes, pray, but go to sleep. You can't change anybody.
Sure. Yeah. With everything that you know about pastoring, I know you've been in the quote unquote real world too. Like some people are like church and the world are different. I understand what they're saying. I get it. But all of your experiences, all of your insights inside and outside the church, what advice would you give to somebody who's navigating the challenges of the real world today?
Do your part to change your world, which is the people you know and the places you go.
Hmm.
I would, I pray enough for Israel or for national things that I can not feel too guilty. But I can't change Trump or Biden. I can change my world, the people I know. Ken Anderson taught me that. I got to write and learn proofreading for 2 months and then write and edit with Ken Anderson. You don't even know the name, but one of the finest Christian writers that ever lived. And that was his motto. And I've tried to embrace it. Change your world, the people you know, the places you go. I can't do anything about Africa. I can pray, but and I do like that. I think that's advice for a businessman or a housewife. You know, you don't have to be the king of England. Just change your world. Bring good to your world, the people you know, the places you go.
The King of England probably drives a Maserati.
He doesn't drive. He
All right.
What a life.
With that said, what advice should they ignore then? What on the flip side, you get some of these things that come across that it's just bad advice. What's some bad advice that people should ignore?
Have it your way. Is that McDonald's or Burger King?
I think it's Burger King because I just heard in the back of my mind the dun 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 dun, which is like the jingle after it. So, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. Nobody was made to have it their way. Adam and Eve tried and it didn't work. And people have been trying ever since. The truth of God put the stars in space and made the eclipse possible. And not only possible, but we could predict because we knew how it was working. We learned this much. Uh, just to have it your way, or just that love is the only answer. Well, whose definition of love? Everybody that goes to bed with each other says they love each other. It might be they're very 14 or very 16 or very unmarried. It's just crazy that things people. Well, I think you should enjoy life. You just come on. We're put here to serve God and to love each other and to do good for people around us and for the people we know. Uh, I would say have it your way or just love everybody. it, love is much more than a feeling. That's
Sure.
for sure.
What about in the area of pastoral? What's some bad recommendations that you hear? I know there are a lot of pastors who listen into this and get a lot of things that come across their desk, in their ears, in their email, whatever the case is. But what are some of those bad recommendations or practices that often come across that should be ignored?
Don't try to go after. If somebody leaves the church, I'm not going to chase them forever, but I'm going to call them. I'm going to care. I'm going to show. And I think, too, I'm back to the hobby horse about tragedy and divorce. Don't give up. And don't, even when I was young, I remember saying to a couple, I could watch them in church, how they were sitting, honest. Uh, don't make too much of this, but it seemed like every Sunday they were apart and everybody sits around the same place. And so I said to them, how's your marriage? At an appropriate time, not from the pulpit. And she started crying, and we began some counseling, and some good happened. But know that you can have an effect. Pastors and leaders and business leaders can have effect on the mood of their city or their town by doing stuff. You do that, Jordan. You jump into community things and police work, and some pastors hide in the closet, study, and go to the pulpit. I think we forget how much people will give us respect if we live respectfully and love constantly. I would say don't belittle, no matter what business you're in, don't belittle what it means to walk around the offices or to say a good word to people, or to not be afraid to try to cheer somebody up or just listen. Nobody listens very well today. I got away from bad advice. I'm trying to get good advice.
Well, it sounds
I
like
don't believe in bad advice.
Yeah, it sounds like the bad advice is, just keep your head down, do your work,
Yeah.
and that's not what you're saying. Is saying no, put your head up, go seek people out and be involved in things, which is
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
So at the time of at the time of this recording, Knute, how old are you?
83.
All right. So in the last 5 years, what have you become better at saying no to?
Death. Yeah. So
That's fair.
Yeah, that's fair indeed. There are 3 stages to life. This is related to your question, but I'll decide how in a moment. Uh, Young adult, middle adult, and you look good. So every time I go to a new church, which is often, somebody says, because they heard I was 83 maybe, or I'd done this for 55 years, they say, you look good. And inside I'm laughing, saying, that means I'm old.
Yeah.
I don't say it out loud. I just say, thank you. Thanks to the Lord. I don't know what I'm better at saying no to. Frankly, I still probably say yes to too many activities, but uh, uh, I don't know. I've never said no to a jump shot. I've never said no to. I love pickleball now, and to slam it. Uh, I don't say no to an assignment if I feel like I can do some good. Maybe it's just going to meetings or seminars that I think I don't need that. I'm not going to go just to appear. So,
Yeah,
but I don't know.
What about when you feel overwhelmed? I mean, you said you say yes to a lot of things, or you find yourself unfocused. What do you do to regain that focus or clarity in those times?
Take a jog.
You still run at your age?
No, we hike. My wife can't run, and I promised when we moved here 15 years ago, that we would exercise what she can do. So we bike or hike the dunes. We're not far from the sand dunes of lower Michigan. So, but physical activity is good for me. Uh, I would I hesitate to say this, but I love you, and I know you love me, and nobody's listening. I would say I hardly ever feel overwhelmed or unfocused, and it got me in trouble, but it also helped me to do a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I if I will not focus on it if I can help it at all. I can't help it at all. Uh, I'm not focused on Trump and Biden. I can't. Both of them have neglected my advice, and we've met many times in my Maserati. I drove both of them around in my Maserati. Uh, no, I can't help the way some churches are going, but if I can help the ones that ask me to help or where I go or that kind of thing, that's not at all pious. I'd say I can be unfocused about Jesus, and then I go to His Word, or I say, God, help me not drift spiritually. So that's very important to me. But about my work or about life itself, or I don't think I feel overwhelmed in the sense of, holy smokes, He's asking me that, and I don't know, but I'm gonna try to find out, or try to give the best answer I can. So,
Well, for those of you that don't, for those that are listening that don't know you, you're a very scheduled person. So there, that's probably part of the reason. And again, I'm not trying to speak for you, but there is some of that comes out with people who are scheduled is we don't feel overwhelmed and unfocused because we know where we're going and how that looks and what that looks like. So, yeah.
yes, and that leads us to the master schedule that every business person or leader or pastor should have. But I will not go there.
You'd love
But I
that's
did that
another
when I
podcast.
right. I did that when I was 25 when I started pastoring. Yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm 50. Almost 60 years later.
Yeah.
Whoa.
All right, the train's moving into the station. We're coming to a close. Last question for you is what's one thing people never ask you, but you wish they would?
You know, we've worked hard, not too hard, but deliberately to connect with uh, people who don't go to church or believe in Jesus except on the true and false test. I wish people would say, "How do you connect with God?" Now that sounds pious or self-serving about evangelism, but how in the world can you live a life and not think about God, uh, or how you connect with Him, or how you receive His love? That would be my philosophical or overwhelming statement. Why don't people think about it? I think they do, but they stay busy or make money or drink or drive their Maserati too fast because they don't want to think, I don't even know God. And I'm I barely know God, but I love Him, and in Jesus Christ see Him and know that His death was for me. How can you live life without asking that?
Yeah.
With pastors, people I work with, it's often, how can I speak better? Or why don't you ask me? I have to say, why don't you do this? Or you're not. Where did you get that? I often say that. Where did you get that?
Hmm.
Because I think they should be getting it from the Bible. Because that's another subject. But that's our truth. That's our revelation from God.
How
But
would you
within that,
how would you answer that question then? Like to if that person asked that question, what do you say back?
oh, dig into that. Stay with the text. If you're topical, okay, but get it from the Bible and say what it means. Who cares what I think?
Right.
I certainly say in sermons, you know what I think on this, but that's just an opinion. This is the revelation of God is this. When it's not clear, and there's plenty of things that aren't clear in the Bible, you say, well, I think this means this, but there's so many things that change our lives, and there's clear as can be.
Hmm.
That's I wish and the fad on topical preaching is not so bad if they preach the word, but to make up ideas or just to quote some really nice, good Christian leader is not enough.
Sure.
But that's a hobby horse we don't want to go to.
Or maybe we
But
do. Who knows? Yeah.
yeah,
That's a tough one. Well, Knute Larson, you landed the plane, man. Thanks so much for sharing your insights and experiences and where you've been. And I think there's a lot of wisdom that you have to give out that's important. And yeah, you're extremely famous to me. So pleasure having you on this. What are we in? We're in the morning. We're right at a time when it's either the morning or the afternoon. So it could be both. But it doesn't matter because some people are listening to this and it's the morning, and some people it's the afternoon. So it's all good.
or if they're overwhelmed, they're up at night at 2:00 and listening.
If you're up at 2
Thank you,
o'clock at
Jordan.
night and you're listening to this, congratulations. Before we wrap up, though, anything else you want to share, or anything that any projects you're currently working on, or anything in regards to where people can find you?
Well, first, thank you, Jordan. I've always admired your love for people and for good activity and good things to do as a leader. I thank you and congratulate you. I no, I just love life. We're here on earth for a while and we're going to be back here when the earth is remade and heaven is here too. So let's enjoy life. Let's do what's right.
Absolutely. All right, to our listeners, those of you who are listening, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Jordan's Famous Friends. You can go back and check out previous episodes. Don't forget, subscribe, rate, comment on your platforms, whichever those may be. We have some big things coming up in regards to some other guests and opportunities to converse with people. So stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with some remarkable individuals that are truly famous. Until next time, take care.